Okay, in this episode, we're going to be talking about happiness.
And how to find happiness at work, yeah?
Yeah, and be more meaningful, or how to find meaningful.
Well, you're giving it away.
I'm giving it all away.
Happiness and meaning.
You're also going to talk a lot about Viktor
Frankl. Not a lot. I don't know a lot about that guy, other than he's gone through a lot and done a lot of good things.
We're going to talk about his story somewhat, about how it's a good thing. We're also going to talk about the culture in law enforcement and some of the changes.
Yes, and it's going to be awesome.
Awesome sauce. Hope you guys enjoy it. Hey, you're listening to Ask a Doc.
Ask a Cop.
With your host, me, Matt Tinney.
And Niels Rosenbaum. Me.
He's a doctor.
And he's a cop.
And today's podcast, I think we were going to talk about, was it burnout?
Burnout, resiliency, and finding meaning and happiness at work, even if you're a police officer.
So we were looking at kind of the culture in law enforcement and how it seems like right now there's a lot of negative media and attention towards law enforcement. And it seems like officers are losing motivation.
That's true. And it's really sad because it's such an essential job and it's so important. And there are ways for the chain of command to boost morale, which one police officer can't wait around for that to happen.
That's a good point. You'll be waiting forever.
Maybe, maybe not. But also looking at ways for individuals to do it on their own.
Right. Well, so this topic Niels had brought up before, because we were revamping some CIT programs, and we were looking at adding that into a class. But what did you see that you saw, this is needed? Something had to trigger that.
What triggered that is I'm very interested in the topic of happiness, how to promote happiness. And
is that the same as mindfulness? I know we talked about it before.
No, mindfulness is a route towards happiness.
Okay.
It's like a tool to achieve happiness. But I guess the officers, unfortunately, have such a tough job, and they make impossible decisions constantly. And they're working between sometimes a media that might not be friendly,
right?
Working with a public that may not always be embracing them, and then a chain of command that might be difficult to work within. So they're sort of getting it brings down morale, and then they're asked to do more and more with less and less pay and less support and backup.
It's true.
And then it feeds into itself. We don't have to delineate all the difficulties with being a police officer. We don't want to bring down the room too much. But let's look at happiness. So people think about happiness. What to you does that mean? Because I have a definition in my mind.
I feel like this is a trick question.
It's not.
No, but it seems like happiness, I feel like there isn't a standard definition. You're right. It's kind of depends on the person. I guess happiness to me is when I feel for work happiness.
Just in general in life, yeah.
Well, I think we're talking about work here.
Sure,
but I think work is a huge part of adult life, and I feel like happiness is when I feel like I accomplished something at work and I'm not overwhelmed or feel like I can accomplish something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great way of looking at it. So for me, the simplistic idea is it's a combination of sort of enjoyment, which is pleasure. Right. You enjoy the mood you're in. You enjoy what you're doing. And then meaning. So you have to have both of those.
Right.
So some people can be, quote, happy if they don't enjoy what they're doing, but they know it's meaningful. They know I'm part of a bigger picture. What I'm contributing to will make a difference. Like someone who just works all the time at a job that maybe they don't like, but they know they're giving their money to their kids and their kids are going to college. And they feel good about themselves and they feel happy.
Right.
Because they have meaning in their life.
That makes sense.
So to achieve happiness in the sense that I'm talking about, it's a combination of meaning and enjoyment.
Okay.
If you're all enjoyment, it's not. First of all, that's not really possible. But you enjoy yourself when you go to an amusement park, but that's not extended happiness.
Some people don't. The lines, the
true.
Food,
it's a lot.
The barf, yeah.
The dizziness.
Yeah, the dizziness.
The screaming kids, the overpriced stuff.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks for bringing
You're
that
welcome.
down.
I just ruined theme parks for everybody.
Being in a waterfall in the tropics. Nice.
Yeah, unless you're
Flies,
afraid
bugs,
of drowning. Yeah.
Snakes.
Tropical bugs, illnesses.
Yes, there's always a potential downside. So there's a lot of people talking about how to achieve meaning at work, because achieving just happiness, you're not gonna,
Right.
or just achieving enjoyment. And there's a lot of stuff like, oh, let's boost enjoyment and make this more pleasurable, and that helps.
Right.
But that's not, you're working.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. So one of the things you want to try to do is give people meaning. So like, you're a cop, you work hard.
Mm-hmm.
What's giving you meaning in your job now? What's keeping you going? And
Wow.
we do get some enjoyment. I mean, we like each other's company. We work with people we really like to be around. People are motivated.
No, I mean, I feel like, well, I feel fortunate in what I get to do just because I only deal with mental health with law enforcement. And I feel like I'm proactively either helping officers with their job or proactively helping people with mental illness in our community. Okay. And I feel what I do is meaningful and that it affects the whole community.
So you have a sense of a greater goal.
Right.
Like that you're part of something, you're helping people.
Yes.
I agree with you 100%. And that's why you have, even when you're stressed out, you're able to say, I do feel happy with my work life.
Right.
It's a part
I'm able
of
to accept my stress.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so I think what can be very difficult, what really leads to burnout is, okay, you're no longer enjoying your job, but now you find no meaning in it.
I guess I can see that. And I think a lot of field officers nationally might be feeling that right now.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot less, even if it's unjust, I can see that.
Yeah, it's brutal. And one of the leading thinkers in the 20th century about finding meaning in life is this guy named Viktor Frankl.
Frankl?
He was in the Holocaust. He survived. And then he wrote a whole bunch of books, and he was a doctor. But his basic idea, and I am no expert on this guy at all, not even by a long shot, but his idea is that meaning comes from within. You sort of, you're in charge of your own meaning. So you find out what's meaningful for you, and you work towards it. So you can't pin your happiness on other people. So even if you're in a very bad situation, as long as you can find meaning in it, your life will have purpose. Does that make any sense at all?
I see what you're saying.
And so
maybe not.
If you're searching, I guess it goes back to the mindfulness stuff.
Right.
And Buddhism, all of it, all interplays in my twisted brain. So if you're searching for meaning and acceptance and praise from out there, from your chain of command, from the media, from, John Q. Public,
you'll never achieve that.
You'll never achieve it. You'll never achieve that meaning that you're looking for.
I wasn't sure if you were saying like meaning in the sense of, like, I find mental health and CIT a very important thing for community and law enforcement.
Yes.
But just saying that and telling some officer, hey, go do that job, but they don't find that it is helpful.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Then it's kind of like, yeah, they'll do their job because they were told to, but they don't find the meaning in it.
Yes, that's a great example. And maybe there's another way to highlight.
I see what you're saying, though.
Okay. Here's another very famous example. The hospital. So they did a psychological study or something on people working in the hospital. So it wasn't the doctors who had the highest sense of value and meaning in their work. Often it was the people cleaning the rooms. They'd interview them and they'd say, I come in here, I clean up the vomit, I change the sheets. I feel like I'm part of a big system that's helping patients. I really feel like what I'm doing is making a difference. I mean, that's something special, right?
That is.
But that is a personal view. That's not, they're not waiting for, well, why don't they give me a raise, and why don't they, promote me, and why don't they get me a better mop? And if you're constantly looking for validation from without, you're going to be in trouble.
That makes sense. But if you were in a career, I mean, I know we're talking about I'll just use law enforcement, we're talking about it, and some of this I think is perceived by ourselves in this profession.
Yes.
But if you think the public doesn't like you anymore right now, or they second guess you, and the media is only playing negative stories,
sure.
How do you find that just starts bleeding into?
I mean, I don't have the magic answer. I wish I did. I think for me, there are some answers, and I'd actually rather hear your answer first. What would you, if you know some officers that are burned out, if you could give them advice, and they actually were receptive to it. They're like,
right.
I'm at a wall. I need some help. I need some advice. I don't know what to do. What would you tell them?
You know, the thing, well, when officers come and talk to me, the biggest complaint that I see is it's their perception of what they think people think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they're like, well, I read this article that said, you know, all that cops want to do is kill people, and that's not true. You know, I got in this to help people. And I'm like, well, you know, what was it based on? And, you know, people sell stories to sell stories.
Sure.
It goes back to general stigma.
Yes.
And so, you know, I say there's still people that they're going to call 911.
Yeah.
And you're part of a greater thing than that. And I just have to go back to, well, what got you into law enforcement?
It's funny you're saying these. This is the exact same things I was going to say.
Because normally when people say something like, well, stop reading the media then. And why did you want to become a cop in the first place? Yeah. And if it was, I really liked, you know, I want to help kids. Well, you know what? Take the time when you see a kid outside, stop and talk to him.
Yeah.
You know, go back to the basics of being law. That's the problem.
No, I couldn't agree more. That's basically exactly what I'm saying. What was going to say, but you said it much better.
You know, I don't want to sidetrack, but we always sidetrack.
Please sidetrack away.
I cannot remember where I read this, or this was just recently, so I wish I knew. But it was about lawyers or laws, actually. Okay. So I was reading some article, and it was about how laws and lawsuits have kind of changed the way that we function now.
Yes, I think I might have read something similar.
Maybe this was a TED Talks or something.
Yes, that's where I saw this, yeah.
And it was something about medical profession, and it made me think of law enforcement. But they were saying that people are so fearful in their professional world of lawsuits that it actually is preventing them from completing their jobs, which actually leads to...
Or just being humans.
Right, or being humans, which leads to more problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you hesitate and you hesitate. Yeah. And that gets brought up a lot with officers. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get sued. And I always bring up to them, you're in court all the time. Yeah. Like, we have lawyers for the city and for wherever you work for this. Like, what are you really worried about? Yeah. And if you think you're going to commit a crime, don't be a cop. If you really think you're going to be committing crime. Yeah. But if you're out there doing the right thing that you got into law enforcement for, and something comes up, something will always come up. Yes. It's just the nature of it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, just accept it. Like, eventually I might get sued. Eventually this comes up. But you know what? At least I was doing my job.
And, I think if you use doing the right thing and documenting well as your guideline, if you use ethical, because if it really does come to a jury, they're people. Right. You know, most people settle. That's what happens. Right. But if you really take the time and energy to go to a jury, you're dealing with other human beings.
Right. But I think in law enforcement, at least in a lot of major cities, settlement's a big thing. And I think for cops, we think that is losing. We don't look at that like... So I think cops take it they said, the city's saying I did something wrong because they paid out. Yeah. And then, you know, you try to explain, like, it's not that. It's just it's actually cheaper to do that than to do the lawyer fees. With us in law enforcement, we think justice. You arrest someone, you go to court, you go through the whole process to prove it.
That makes sense.
And for when someone doesn't do that to back you, it feels like you're the wrong one.
Right. Yeah, no, it feels bad.
And so, you know, it's all about trying to change the mindset of it. Like, this isn't criminal. You know, people are going to sue. It's just what happens. And changing, like, it's just a course of the job. Don't worry about it.
I mean, you're talking about acceptance.
Right.
Like, if you accept the worst-case scenario, then that's sort of liberating.
Right. But I think it's more of changing your mindset to a civil lawsuit. It's not the same as what you do when you arrest someone.
Oh, I got you. Now I follow you. Now I follow you more. Because they're constantly thinking people are going to jail and this and that. But this would be a civil lawsuit.
Like, you know, I went through all this to show that this person raped this person or this person shot this person. But then the city is just saying, oh, here's money, so they must have said I was wrong. Yeah. But I wasn't wrong. And you're like, I agree with you. And they're like, well, the city or the county, you know, the state, they don't agree with me. Yeah. Like, yeah, they do. But it's just, this is a different world of civil lawsuits, completely different than criminal justice.
That makes sense.
Anyone listening, if you guys hear us coughing, we're sorry. I missed the last podcast because I had the flu, and you might hear us coughing. I apologize now. But I don't know how to change that thought process.
I agree exactly with what you're saying, so that people should sort of spend a little bit of time, and it doesn't take that much time, 5 minutes in the morning or in the afternoon, or even just between conversations to think, why am I here? Why did I choose this? To rejuvenate that pathway in their brain, literally, of why are they here? Why did they choose being a cop? And you're right, it's probably because they want to make a difference. You still have that ability. It
Right.
might not be as easy. It might not be as readily available from going one call to the next. But you're right. If you spend that extra 5 minutes talking to a kid and giving them a pep talk, that can make your whole day.
Yep.
And with medicine, it's people are just dying and get worse all the time, and then everybody dies.
Yes, that's true. You always see the negative side of the world too.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And so, the doctors who have the most job satisfaction are actually oncologists, because everybody, and geriatricians, because the patients die. You kind of know what the outcome is, and if you're able to divert one, and you accept it, and you grow very close with your patients in that way, and so it helps. It goes back to the acceptance, and so there's a lot of different tips like that. I saw another interesting study about people don't want to, when you come home from a job. Let's say you have a hobby, like you play guitar, right? And it brings you joy and pleasure. So you're working on some new song or something.
Right.
When you come home after a day of work that you don't really like, you don't want to play guitar, right? You're like,
that's true.
Oh, I'm just so tired. But there's sort of a hump that you have to get over. So if you get past the activation, meaning you put in a little extra work and force yourself, that's it. I'm just going to sit down and start doing my hobby. You might not like it at first, but within like 5-10 minutes, you'll get reignited.
Really?
That's what I mean. It doesn't happen with everybody all the time, but but think about it. Those times where you're like, I'm so tired. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do that one thing I love.
Right.
And then you don't do it. You end up watching TV.
I actually think that's the same for things you don't like homework or a work assignment.
Yeah, that's true.
You put it off, and you're like, let me just force yourself to do it. And probably 5 minutes in, then your brain's working.
You're just
going.
Doing it.
Right.
Yeah, you're just doing it.
You don't think of it anymore.
But
that is an interesting.
You can energize yourself by not feeling so unenergetic.
Give me an example of how you're doing that for work. Then how to
me personally?
Well, no, like that example is for like a hobby off, but you're saying to re-energize your work love. How do you do that?
It's hard. I think it is a lot about changing your own mindset and seeking what it is that is important to you. So unless you take stock, if you're so busy blaming everybody else, and that's the human condition. We all blame everybody else for our misery.
That's true.
But if you take a moment to stop blaming other people and start thinking, well, what am I contributing to my own misery, and what can I make a difference? That's a colossal change in your thinking that most people never make. And so if you're able to really embrace that, even for a short while, you might start thinking these questions that you're asking. Well, what can I do differently? What was good about my day? What was that one thing that did give me some meaning?
Right.
And what are the things that are in my scope of control that can bring me meaning? And maybe it is spending an extra 2 minutes with a kid that is in a vulnerable spot and that can use a mentor. I don't know. It's individualized.
Right.
So if you asked what brought you to do this? Like I'll give you a personal example. So obviously doctors go into medicine because they want to help people, make people feel better. But as I was saying, most people get worse or die. And so it's kind of like playing a sport. You might play hockey, right? You're playing hockey, you're playing horribly. But then you make that one play where you're out of your head and you steal the puck and you skate down the ice and you score.
Right.
And it's like awesome. And you're like, that's what keeps you coming back.
I see what you're saying.
And so if you can hold on to those moments that keep you coming back.
Right.
And it's the same with work. So instead of focusing on all the misery, if you focus on the things that keep you there and that you enjoy, and I mean focus literally where you choose to put your attention. It's very important.
No, that makes sense. And I think what is really dragging down officers is kind of that. I think it was the respect that they see from the community. Like, oh, thank you so much, you saved the day.
Yeah.
Or thank you so much for what you do. I know you guys see horrible things.
We only say that to firemen. No.
Right. But I think that was one of the things that really helps officers. Like, okay, you know what? Hearing that thanks from somebody really then helped me accept that I just saw 10 dead bodies, or I saw this and this and all this trauma. It kind of makes, then it was worth it. Like, that's what I'm working for. Yeah. And then I think now that we always see as some negative media, it kind of takes away, like, that was kind of what we were working for, is like, well, we're here to help you guys.
Oh, it's gotta
and I
be
think
so
that's
hard.
what was a hard part.
I'm not saying what I'm offering as suggestions are easy. They're very,
they
very
are.
difficult. I'm not saying your job is really objectively very hard.
But I think it's the type of person that goes to law enforcement. I think that's the hard part, because I think in order to, what is it called when you, because of all the trauma we see and we take it on, what is that called?
PTSD? Burnout?
Is it PTSD burnout? No. You'll remember you were saying this
before.
Vicarious
trauma.
Vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
And I think the way that people in law enforcement, and even probably firefighters, mainly I think law enforcement sees more death than firefighters, just because it's not emergency medicine. But I think we kind of accept it or come up with coping it because we have this idea that we're doing good. Or like we're fighting evil, so to say. I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
no, that does.
You say like you're fighting crime, like you feel. It's not like, oh, I punch the clock and then I go and I answer just calls, like calls for service. I mean, we say that it's calls for service, but we do it with this hidden idea, like we're fighting crime.
You are.
Well, yeah, but I think it adds to that. So then all of a sudden, when you think of yourself as like you're out there trying to battle this evil in your community, and then no one appreciates it.
Oh, that's
and
hard.
then they're trying to say you are the evil one in the community.
Oh, God,
I think it's
so
kind
brutal.
of changing, and it's making officers question their mindsets and stuff.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, it's awful.
I don't know how to.
I don't know how
it's
to.
a hard one.
There's not an easy solution.
No, but I like what you're saying. I mean, if you could take the time and before you even go to briefing, just. Or even if you guys have take-home cars and you're driving to work, take that time to think about what it was that got you into law enforcement.
Yeah.
And think of how you could do it. Because you can always find an extra 5 minutes on a call to talk to somebody if that's what you like.
That's the thing, right? If you're on a call that you feel like, gosh, I can make a difference, hang in there a little longer. I mean, you have some latitude over what you can do. But, I mean, the extreme example of this kind of stuff is like Viktor Frankl. You know what I mean? He is in, I don't know where he was, but he was in a concentration camp.
Right.
And he was able to find meaning there. He wasn't able to find enjoyment and happiness, but he was able to find meaning.
That's
and so
very extreme.
If someone like that can do it, that possibility is open to all of us.
Do you remember what he said, how he found meaning, or what it was?
I don't know much about him. It was basically, the idea is you're in charge of what you believe and what you think, and that's the only thing. One of my favorite quotes by him was, between the stimulus and the response is a pause. There's a space there.
Okay.
And in that space is all your freedom and your opportunity for happiness, essentially, and meaning. Because most people think, okay, there's a stimulus, somebody calls a cop a pig or an a-hole, and then there's a response. You feel terrible, you get angry, maybe you do whatever you can.
Right.
But between the stimulus and the response, there's that moment that you make a choice. You make a decision.
To either get upset by it or brush it off. Or
exactly. And that's your freedom. So even in a concentration camp, he felt like he had freedom.
Right.
Because of that pause.
Yeah.
Which is something. I wish I could do it. I mean, it's
I
easier
wish
said than done.
Yeah, that is much easier. Oh, that's great. He does that. That little pause, I don't even think I'd notice. But, from talking to all my friends and coworkers and stuff, I kind of feel like I'm one of the few that's not affected by the media.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it hasn't really bothered me much.
Why is that?
And I was going to say that I think it's because of all the research I've done and reading about stigmas and mental health.
Okay.
So I think a lot of that plays into media, and I just realized, it's just people, it's a misunderstanding.
Oh, gotcha.
And for me
that makes sense.
That'd be like I just keep getting upset every time I hear someone point at someone and be like, or I hear someone say, that crazy person. I don't get upset and be like, how dare you say that they're crazy. Do you know what I mean?
I guess that's an interesting.
And so I just am like, there's stigmas, there's misunderstanding, and like right now there's a huge misunderstanding in law enforcement, and we're not the only culture that's ever been affected by that.
Yes,
it's still in mental health. It's been in racism and races. It's been going on forever.
Yes,
and I guess I've just accepted that this is just a hard time right now.
That's interesting. What I think the part of that equation that you're brushing over a little bit is you also feel like you're doing what you can to change it.
I guess that's true.
People get angry because they feel powerless. So they hear somebody say, "Oh, that crazy person," and then they get all indignant and mad and they scream and yell. And that may make the situation better, it may not. But it's certainly not a controlled reaction.
Right.
And so what you are able to have is a controlled reaction. I can see what it is. I accept what it is in the sense of I know it's happening. And I'm going to do what I can to change it. So now that I've diagnosed the problem, I'm going to move forward slowly, methodically, smartly, compassionately to change it.
Right.
As opposed to, you know what I mean?
Right. Because I think, there's more and more stuff like coffee with a cop or sit down with a cop.
I think those are good ideas.
Right, that are going nationwide. More and more places are doing that to try to destigmatize or humanize police.
Sure.
And get them back connected with their community. But I think the problem we have as lower level officers.
You're not a low level, man.
Well, I'm just saying.
You're very high in my heart.
When you have like field officers and first line detectives, your low level ones, we don't feel like we can openly talk about being a cop. We feel this like you have to ask permission to
Is that
speak
true
honestly.
All through the whole country, huh?
It seems like that. And so I think these officers, we go to like these community meetings and someone asks like a tough question like, what do you feel about this? Mm-hmm. What do you feel about this policy or this thing that happened?
Yeah.
And you feel like you're not allowed to openly talk about it.
Sure.
And I think then it kind of, even the public's like, well, they're hiding stuff from us.
Yeah.
But it's not like we want to openly talk about it, but we're also fearful we're going to get in trouble for it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that we're going to say is bad, but I think there's this, in paramilitary culture, we don't feel the ability to openly discuss our jobs.
That's interesting. I guess, that's a tough one. I guess that's true in every job. You feel like I can't openly criticize the people above me.
Right. Even if it's not people, but criticize a part of the job.
Yeah, I guess that's true, huh? And how does one combat that? I guess you have to decide how much distress that's causing you and how important it is to thoughtfully speak out.
It's an odd, but I think it's just in our heads.
Oh, you don't think it's true? Huh?
Because I've openly talked stuff that people are like, I can't believe you just said that. And I've never gotten negative, but I'm just like...
What's an example? Can you think of one? I know it's hard when I put you on the spot like that. You think, and I will blabber on.
We were at that Ideas in the Community. There's these things every month where we met with a community member or community group, and we would talk about, this was for mental health, but people asked me, because I pushed for legalization of marijuana. Mm-hmm. So they asked me, and it was a table, it's mainly all cops, and we had two people. One was a college student, one was like a retired individual. But the college student asked, what's your guys' opinion on I think marijuana should be legalized? Well, all the cops just looked at each other, didn't say anything, and I just said, yeah, I'm fine, legalize it. And everyone looked at me like...
And then you sparked up a doobie.
Well, no, but I'm like, if that's what the public wants, America, we're built on...
Is that what you want?
On the people. No, we wouldn't be able to smoke it anyway as cops.
No, the law. Do you think it should be legalized?
I'm fine if it is.
No, not if you're fine. Are you for or against?
If I had a vote,
See, look at you. You're like, I can't tell anybody I'm on air.
I think if they were to tax it and actually put it back into drug treatment stuff, I'm all for that.
Okay.
Because it's so hard to get drug treatment.
Yes.
I'm actually fine if they legalize all drugs, and actually all that money goes right back into the treatment.
Sure.
And that way we actually have places. Look at whenever we try to find...
cocaine dispensary across your street.
How the hardest thing I think is to find a rehab place. Whenever we get clients and we're trying to find rehab, it's almost impossible unless they have tons of money.
Yeah, you have to have money.
But how do you find that money then? And I'm
tax
I'm
the
just
people
saying.
who are using the drugs.
Because
anyway, that's a rabbit hole.
But and I brought it up, and everyone looked at me like so shocked, and I just explained. I said, it's already a misdemeanor, so it's just a citation. And a lot of times, officers, we use discretion anyway. If it's a small amount, maybe we give them a verbal warning.
Sure.
It's like, so it's not as big of an idea that you're perceiving from media. We already do some of this stuff.
It's already sort of decriminalized to some extent.
We don't look at it. It's not like we just found a pound of cocaine on you. You had a joint on you. It's not the same where in the past where you'd get beat up and locked up with these horrible stories you hear. And so I'm like, I'm fine with it.
Funny.
Well, no, it's not funny if it happened. but and everyone's like, I can't believe you said it. I'm like, they're asking me. I'm saying this as a person.
No, but it's interesting trying to track back to the original conversation about meaning and happiness at work. There are other ingredients to achieve that, and one of them is autonomy. Autonomy and mastery is another one. So autonomy means you have discretion. Literally, you can do things on your own without permission, and when you lose that, it feels worse. But what you're just describing is, you felt good that you were able to speak up for yourself, and then you gave examples of how you're in the street and you're able to make discretionary decisions. And when people are given autonomy, they're more creative, just like you and all the things you've done for this department. So autonomy leads to more job satisfaction and better output.
I see what you're saying. It's a hard one. I think officers, we feel, because one of the oddities I think about being in law enforcement right now, and this is just a changing of times, is social media.
Okay.
Most departments, and like the one that I work for, we're not allowed to openly express our First Amendment of freedom of speech on social media, because at all times they're saying we represent the law, the police department.
Yeah, I mean,
no other city positions that way.
Is that true?
There's not another one that's that way. I'm sure the mayor, like political stuff, but do you see what I'm saying?
I guess that's true.
I think a lot of stuff currently has changed for law enforcement, and so it's a profession that's really growing right now or evolving.
Yes, okay.
And so I think a lot of people are stuck in this weird evolution where they have one idea of law enforcement and other people have a different, and it's not the same. So you're getting into law enforcement with an idea in mind, but everything's changing right now. And so it's just kind of chaos.
I could see that. I mean, there's a lot of turnover in the mindset of law enforcement and the culture. I guess, there's another thing I was reading about college students and empathy. Empathy has gone down, and this is also probably true with cops, because one of the reasons is because people are on their phones all the time. So if you're out on the campus you see a group of 5 friends sitting there, it used to be that they would sit and talk.
Right.
And now at least 2 or 3 of them are on their phones.
That's true.
Or half on their phones, half in the conversation.
That's true.
And think about all the lunches we have. We don't have very many lunches. But when we do go out to lunch at work, there's always somebody on the phone. We've never had a lunch where... No, but I'm saying...
Is there one person in particular has difficulty with this phone?
I don't think at lunch, I don't think I do it worse than anybody else. I think at meetings I'll sign out. But I think...
No, you're right.
We go to lunch and somebody's always on their phone, either deliberately or they have to because they feel like they have to respond right away. But most of the time it's, oh yeah, I might as well check this or do that. Or it sucks the life out of everybody else there.
That's true.
Yeah, and so little things like that can make a difference. To say if camaraderie is a huge buffer against misery at work, which it is,
right,
then you should act like comrades. I mean, not in the Russian sense, but
comrade.
But if you
comrade.
But if you all sit down. This is precious time that you have with your colleagues. Don't be on your phone the whole time.
That's a good point. And so and that goes back to the evolving of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Right now, it seems like a lot of places are pushing to have cops available more quickly. And so they're taking away the sit-down time of briefings, where they might start doing briefings from cars or from things like that.
Bad
and emails.
Things happen then, too.
And so it's, so there's this, the whole technology is trying to get into law enforcement.
Yes.
And so it's still a new idea in a lot of these things. So it's a work in progress, but I think that's a huge part.
It's got to be a better balance,
right? Because when I was in the field, briefing was fun. You
was
sit
it really?
down, you talk to everybody. Yeah. You tell the stories of the night before.
Oh, nice.
And things like that, and it kind of re-energized you and gave you that flame back too. Like, oh, I busted this guy. He beat up his wife, and he did this, and this. Like, wow, yeah, you did a good job, and everyone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It kind of
Are you missing it?
You talked about it. We don't see. I guess in our position, we don't do briefings really. We do staffings. It's a lot different.
No. But are the briefings out in the field still working the same way as far as you know?
I think now we've been part of and this is only our department, but a lot of the briefings now are done with that TV. So it's that TV show that comes on, and so everyone has to be quiet, and it's not much of does anyone have a good story, or does anyone Are they seeing this?
Yeah, that is
it's a
the
lot more
antithesis of team building.
It's a lot more like, watch this. This is what we're told to watch. This is what we're told to read. Now go. We don't have time to sit around.
Yeah, no, that's sad. And you guys are mostly in cars by yourselves too.
Yeah, we ride single units.
Is that true throughout the country?
No, some places double up. Some places ride single.
Okay.
It just depends. Some even have walking beats.
I mean, what other ways do you think you can boost morale? That
Internal?
Like here, another thing is we always talk about is starting a peer support.
Right.
And it seems like we even are always waiting for permission. Well,
That's
we
true.
need permission. We need support. We need the chain of command to give us the pager and the phone.
Right.
I mean, come on. If we really wanted to do it, we could get it done on our own. But it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if something is meaningful to you and passionate, putting in the extra hours will pay off in terms of job satisfaction.
No, I see that. And I think there's a lot you can do for internally, because maybe if, like what I'm saying with briefings, how I like that, maybe you could just talk to your squad and just say, hey, when we get done with this briefing, let's just all meet at the cars before we all leave.
Yeah, that's
and
a
then
good
you
idea.
still take 5 minutes to have little conversations about them. There's still little things you can do.
Absolutely.
But it seems like this goes back to the lawsuit. It seems like we're more functioning on let's not get in trouble liability as opposed to
let's
hey,
do the right thing.
You did good. Let's talk about good. Instead, it's more and more like, okay, guys, let's sit down. Oh, just so you know, you can't do this anymore, or be careful when you do this, or do this.
Yeah.
There's not much positive anymore.
Yeah.
And some places do it. Like during that, we met the old chief from Raleigh.
Yeah,
Remember
he
him?
was
And
good.
he was talking about how he always would get on and do a public announcement to all of his guys on a good job or a good call.
Sure.
That he always did that. I'm like, that would be great to hear. It'd be great.
You guys
that
don't do that?
No, and I mean, it comes and goes in spurs. And right now, it's just a low time in law enforcement. And so now would be a good time for supervisors and leaders to really make the effort to talk about the good things.
Absolutely.
And show it. Like
Absolutely.
now more than ever.
Those are those little things that don't cost anything, not even
Right.
time.
Right.
You just spend an extra, maybe 30 seconds to say how wonderful a person did a job and give a round of applause. That's good. It
Right.
makes a big difference. And those are the kind of things that go out on the wayside.
Right. Especially because it goes, I mean, when your whole culture of your job is kind of everyone's down, it's not just your first level line officers, the boots on the grounds. I mean, it's everybody.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just sucks out of everyone.
Yeah. No, and there's bureaucracy. That's one of those things that I think that was in that same talk where the girl was selling cupcakes. She had the best cupcakes in the world, and she was selling just enough to help put a college fund. And then somebody filed a complaint, and the Food and Drug Administration or whoever it was said, you have to have a much, much bigger kitchen, and it has to be
do it,
inspected. It's just like, are you kidding me? And so they shut down her business.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. And I think law enforcement needs to be regulated. I agree with that.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm not saying like, oh, you guys need to quit randomly stopping and patting down people. No, I agree. You can't just randomly pat down people for no reason. Like
You
the
can
stop
in New
and
York,
frisk.
can't you?
No, that's what I'm talking about.
That failed.
Yeah, you can't do that.
I thought that did pass in New York.
Yeah, they passed that. That doesn't mean it was constitutionally legal.
Did it get overturned?
Yes, you can't just stop whoever you want and pat them down.
You could in New York for a while.
That doesn't make it legal, though. And that's what I'm saying, is that there are times when people try to do something for a good cause, and that was to stop terrorism, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the idea behind it was good, but we have a constitution. And, if our ideas that we overlooked, and it's not that we said, oh, we know this is against the Constitution, we do it. Most of the time, people are coming up with ideas to help the public, and then they might have overlooked that. And then, what if you have to stop because of the Constitution? You stop.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that. And law enforcement has to have that.
Wait, are you saying you're fine following the Constitution of the United States?
Yes.
That's really a breakthrough.
When everyone
Thank
know
you.
that I'm the only
You're
officer
not above
that
the
is
law
fine.
anymore. You're like, Constitution, and I'm up here.
But I think, a lot of these things, instead of being explained to all the officers, like, oh, guys, we came with this idea to stop terrorism. We could just stop and pat down anyone we
I thought
wanted.
it was to stop black people.
I'm just saying, like, if they're like, this was it, we overlooked the idea, but this is what's wrong with it when it comes to constitutional policing. We have to have probable cause. If they explained it, you wouldn't get as much like.
If you explained it, then it would be like, yeah, we can't do it.
Well, no, and that's that's what I'm saying. If instead, when law enforcement gets told no, you just have it mean and say, "Oh, they're telling us we can't do this.
Oh,
anymore.
I see.
We
What
can't
you're
do our
saying.
job."
It's condescending.
And so then officers take it like, "How no one knows what my job is. You can't tell me that."
Yeah.
Instead of just explaining it and being like, and then officers go, "Oh, I didn't know that.
Sure.
But now I see what you're saying. Now I see why
that brings
we
me
can't."
to my next point about one of the key ingredients for job satisfaction is mastery, or the ability to learn and to master things.
Mm-hmm.
So if people aren't telling you the reason, they're just telling you to do it, there's no sense of mastery. There's no sense of I'm learning and I'm involved. And so if you're not going to get it, then you have to do it on your own. And you're very good at that. Like you're given an order and you think, let me understand why this is happening. And you'll read about it and know.
Right. You're trying to say, and I'll argue why we shouldn't be doing things on it.
I left that part out.
But no, I think that's important to have the ability. I'm lucky to have that time to get something and be like, you know what, let me look this up real quick. Sometimes people aren't. If you're working in the field, it's kind of a customer service base, so you're responding to that next ticket.
I guess that's true.
So it is hit or miss, but that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, this just goes into general negotiations and training. What we tell people, you just telling someone not to do something. We as humans, especially Americans, like, don't tell me what to do.
No,
don't just tell me no.
Yeah.
And expect me to be okay with it.
Yeah.
But instead of just telling me no, explain what's going on. Then explain
no
why
means
you can't do
man.
it. Well, do you know what I'm saying? Like that is what really helps people.
Absolutely.
And it's weird to me in law enforcement, we're pushing that in training, but we don't do it for our own people. We're like, you should know when I say no, it means no. Follow my chain of command, as opposed to, let me explain to you why this has changed. And that way you get buy-in from us
what do you
too.
think about the whole, not our particular chain of command, but the idea of a rigid chain of command?
I see both sides of it. I honestly do. I think, you have to have some kind of structure. So I wish it was a little bit more open.
Okay.
So some departments are very military. So you have your sergeant. You can't talk to your lieutenant unless your sergeant tells you to, and you can't talk to your commander unless your sergeant and lieutenant tell you to. And you constantly go up and up and up. And I can see that because, let's say if it was just completely open and you are a commander, someone might be like, oh, they might feel more inclined or special feelings to be able to talk to someone with that high of a rank.
Yeah.
So constantly when they're trying to do work, they just have officers coming in, hey, Commander, how are you? I just want to run this by you.
Okay.
When the commander's thinking, oh, your sergeant should be able to handle that. Why are you coming to me for it? So I can see where it helps with workflow as the higher you go.
Okay.
But I think on some of it, it's hard when it comes to wanting to be part of the overall organization. So if you have an idea, like, I think doing a community meeting in a neighborhood once a week would allow me to talk to the neighbors and do more community policing.
Sure.
But if you can't just ask the commander who has to approve that, but you have to wait a month because you have to write a memo, your sergeant has to approve it, then your lieutenant's gone.
It's mind-numbing.
Right.
Yeah.
You feel like you really don't have an effect to create positive change.
So there should be a balance there.
Right. And I don't know how you would create that, though.
I don't know. I saw something else interesting. Ready? Changing subjects again.
Changing.
Experiment.
Was it a turtle?
It's a famous. It was chickens.
Oh,
famous experiment done on chickens, and so this chickens breed pretty quickly, and so this guy had a big flock of chickens, a psychologist, and he had them in different coops, and he wanted to figure out which ones would be the most productive, like which would be the most productive workers.
Right.
And they judged productivity by how strong they were and how many eggs they produced as a clan.
Okay.
And so he took one just clan that was doing well, and left it on its own. And then he took the super chickens from every clan, the ones that were just the strongest, the mightiest, producing the most eggs.
Right.
And then he put them in another pin. And then I think he had ones that were kind of cooperative.
Okay.
And so he bred them for 6 generations. And guess what happened?
I would think the super chickens would breed
do the best,
better.
right?
Yeah.
But what happened was the ones that already had a functioning unit and did well, and everybody sort of the cooperative quote chickens,
right.
They did very well. They were on average fine, and then the cooperative ones did even better. The ones that didn't have a strict hierarchy,
right.
The super chickens, they were like all dead practically because
Really?
because they're all in that pecking order fighting to be number one. So they were just like pecking at each other for generation after generation because they're all
Interesting.
alpha chickens. And so they just basically massacred each other. And they had very few eggs, and they were all scraggly and underfed, and it was horrible.
That's very interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
wonder if
When
that
I
is-
heard that, I was like, that can't be right.
Because it sure seems almost you could, not that law enforcement's chickens, but we're all kind of one like leader
Yeah,
mentality, and
yeah.
right now there's a big need for law enforcement change, and it's interesting to think if it's
Our
like that.
culture rewards leadership and striving towards the top much more than social capital, being well respected, working within a
Right.
team, having people look to you for wisdom and guidance. That's not as well respected as clawing your way up to the top. And then even like with Little League, I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, but people get really upset. Like,
Yeah.
why does everybody get a prize? This is so stupid. Who, what, blah, blah, blah. And I see the merit to that
Right.
it gets to be too much. But it's also because it's going counter to the whole culture of everybody must rise to the top
Right.
and fight. I don't
Right.
think you should create a whole bunch of people who are just entitled. That's
Right.
a big problem. But the idea of you're a great follower and you're a great team player is not rewarded.
Right.
You have to have followers.
Right.
You have to have people who think things through and say, yeah, I'm going to go with this guy.
Right.
And not everybody can be a leader because it's a disaster.
That's true. And I think in law enforcement in particular, I mean, you're almost, it's one of the few jobs where you're almost kind of like an independent contractor, really. I know that sounds weird, right? That sounds
Contractor?
bad. I shouldn't
Taking
say
out hits on
contractor.
people?
No, but it's kind of like you go in and you're like, I'm just saying, like if for a field officer, you go in, they tell you this is what's going on,
Uh-huh.
and you leave.
Yeah.
You don't really have that direct oversight. No one's really following or checking you up that often.
They are now. You have
But
cameras.
well, no, you have cameras.
Yeah.
So you're the one operating it. You don't.
Yeah, I
you
guess
know,
that's true.
you go and you make the decisions on each call. You don't have to go and say, "I think this person needs to go to jail. Let me call my supervisor. Hey, this is what's going on. They need to go to
Okay.
jail." You make those decisions, and so
Okay.
that I think gives a lot of pride because, and it's a lot of responsibility. But that's very interesting with the chickens. I wonder if someone only studied law enforcement for a long time and their
Bred them.
personalities, and then it'd be very interesting to see.
They've done it right here. But anyway, oh my god! But no, it can. It was eye opening when I first read about that, and that's an old sort of study. you
Yeah.
know.
The chicken study.
The chicken. I don't know what it's called. I forget the guy who did it, Feld or something like that. But
Sanders?
Colonel
Was it
a
Colonel
col- was
Sanders?
it- was-
Oh my goodness, that guy's
now
a
he's
genius.
got super chickens that all get
That's
along
why.
well,
That's
and we
how he
eat them.
developed KFC out of his super chickens.
KFC. You know why they changed the name to KFC?
Uh,
To get rid of the word fried. Because people don't like fried things. Because
Really?
it sounds unhealthy. Yeah.
I love fried things.
My favorite KFC story, and maybe we can wrap up after this, is that KFC, God, it must have been 10 or 15 years ago, came out with a lower fat chicken. And so what it turned out to be was the chicken actually was fattier, the portions were smaller. And
Wow.
Yeah, that's something special.
Wow, that's impressive
Yeah.
that they were able to create super fatty chickens. So what you're saying is the super chickens do
The
exist.
super chickens are going to
That
take
study
over the
was
world.
wrong. There is super
the
chickens.
super chickens are taking over the world.
So, for recap on this one, can you briefly talk about some tips on finding that happiness and reigniting that at work?
I think at work only. I think you can't just say just work.
Well, I'm
so
just saying in general. Sorry.
When you're come home from a day that you're beat down, you're tired, you have no meaning in your work life, don't let that affect your home life. You have to
Right.
take that extra effort and dig really deep and say, yes, I'm going to go play ball with my kid, even though all I want to do is lay on the couch.
Right.
Because that'll energize you once you get over that one point. So that's something you can do on off hours. The other is to examine what it is that makes you feel worthwhile and meaningful, what drew you to this job in the first place, and remind yourself of that and try to achieve that in small doses as much as you can. And realize that meaning comes from within.
Right.
Meaning and happiness really, for the most part, comes from within. We're all fed. We all have
Right.
jobs. We all have houses for the most part. Yeah, everything else is gravy. And so don't blame everybody else for all your problems.
Right. So just accomplish your own goals.
Yeah.
You know, don't look for, oh, hey, I finished this for you. Do you like it?
Yeah, you can
Kind of
understand you have limitations
Right.
and work within those limitations. I mean, it's easy, much easier said than done because
Yes,
it
it
can
is.
sound very condescending, like I
Right.
have it all figured out, which I don't by a long shot. And it's very, very hard and takes a lot of practice.
No, that is very hard to do.
But
I
it
mean,
can
I
be-
have trouble
but it
when
can
it
be
comes to
done.
stress stuff.
It
So,
can
I
be
mean,
done.
everyone does.
Yeah.
And it's
Me too. I mean, I
Yeah.
get stressed out.
that's a great one, though. And then what about any topics about all this stuff with the negativity in law enforcement right now? Any tips on?
Why don't you give us some tips, Matt?
Well, the thing I would say is, you know, read up about how media affects things and, you know, read about the history of law enforcement and see how this has come up before. And,
Sure.
you know, we're still here and people are still happy. You
Yeah.
know, it's just a changing of times and try to look at the different ways. And the biggest thing I can say is if you're in a department that's currently changing and you don't like it, be part of it. You know, what will help you in law enforcement, I think, is coming up with a solution and not just complaining.
Yes.
So if you don't like something, don't just call up your chief and say, hey, I don't like this, without a solution.
Sure.
But come up with a comparable solution with the community in mind, with what brought the original.
That's a
If-
good point.
if
And
all
sort
the-
of do it until you're told no. too,
Right,
if it's
and-
a good solution.
Right. And if the problem we have is, well, they're telling us to wear cameras, and I don't want to. Well, why do they want to wear cameras? Oh, it's for help with liability and open up what we're doing in the community. You know, people just think they're telling me to do this. So unless,
I gotcha.
You know, you have to look
Sure.
if the reason why something has changed is to better the community, you're gonna have to come up with something
I
to better
agree.
the community.
And I think that's an excellent wrap up.
Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And keep sending your questions.
Definitely send your questions to ask@gocat.org. Any kind of question, even if it's weird. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter.
And we'll see you next here. What do you say?
We'll see you next
We'll
week.
be here next week.
We'll be here next week.
Bye.
Bye.